despite the exalted company of the Matterface, I'm trying to work out why I'm still the last man standing on this show. Quite what I walked into here. Jim's gone, Luke's gone, Joe's gone, and I'm standing around like the proverbial bad penny. I need to have a word with myself. And you pay me what I want, when I want, how I want, otherwise bugger off.
By turning the Manchester United supporters upside down and shaking them to see what else he can get out of their pockets.
Hang on a second, you clowns. That doesn't stand up legally.
Difference it makes.
Is that how it works in the socialism world of Sam Matterface?
He's got to pull his finger out now, hasn't he, really?
What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Then you tell people the truth and they don't like it and they can't cope with it. Believe me.
A riot is an ugly thing.
Barcelona have agreed a deal to sign Manchester United forward Marcus Rashford on loan with an option of a permanent purchase. The 27-year-old has taken a €10 million pay cut, while United won't be paying anything towards his salary. Meanwhile, Manchester United have agreed a fee of £65 million with a further £6 million worth of add-ons for Brentford forward Bryan Mbuemo. Let's start, Neil. So many have tried and failed with Manchester United to try and turn them around. What are your thoughts on how Ruben Amorim is going about it?
I just thought he started off. I don't believe you can go into a club and say, I'm going to play this system. I think you go into a club and look at what players you've got and then think, right, I'll play this system to suit the good players that I've got. But he's gone in and said he's going to play three at the back and all this. And I don't think they've got three centre-halves. I don't think they've had three centre-halves for years. Or full-backs good enough to do what he wanted. So I think, they signed two decent players. But I think they should have started at the other end, mate, if I'm honest, to build a side that's going to come back into it.
Barcelona are restricted on who they can sign, right? So let's be clear, this idea of Marcus Rashford going to Barcelona has only come about because Barcelona were told by La Liga they weren't going to get Nico Williams because they weren't allowed to invest money in transfer fees.
Okay.
So they can only sign players on loan and then specific salary marks at the moment. But what do you think they saw with Marcus Rashford at Aston Villa that made him sort of the target, a person that they thought could fit into a team that's also got Rafinha, Lewandowski, Ferran Torres, Lamine Yamal, Pedri, Gavi? How is he going to fit in there and what's he going to do?
They lost, didn't they lose? They've lost the left-sided lad. I can't remember his name now, but they've lost the left-sided lad at Barcelona, and I think they've got him in just to fit in there. I don't think he'll play up front, mate.
Well, left-sided last season was Rafinha, and Rafinha got 34 goals and 25 assists. Lewandowski played through the middle, and Lamine Yamal's playing on the right-hand side. So
he's a very fortunate boy.
He is
a very fortunate boy. I'm interested to see how the metrics of the analysis you just gave. How's he taken a €10 million pay cut when his central employer is Manchester United? So Man United have a contractual obligation. Whether it's offset by what Barcelona are contributing is what it is. But I don't really see how Man United have gotten out of their central obligation.
Well, is it not because he's agreed to take a pay cut in order to be able to facilitate the move?
That would be interesting if he has indeed, because he's got a contract. So it would be interesting to see how they've...
But he's desperate to go there.
Well, yeah, because he wants to play next season in the World Cup. So I think that was one of the major levers that United had to pull. Everyone was sitting there saying, well, how's this going to work? He holds the cards. He isn't going to go anywhere that he doesn't want to go. The flip side of it was he was going to sit in the middle of nowhere not playing football. So I think they found a solution. I don't know how the mechanisms have been deployed to work out the fact that his salary can be sacrificed. I don't know how he's done a deal of variation on his contract. I'm assuming that he has. Barcelona must have some contractual obligations to buy him. So that must mean in a year's time. I don't just mean airy-fairy ones. I mean real ones. Yeah. Because ultimately, otherwise, United are achieving very little by saving 15
I think he'll have thought he's won the polls, mate, Rashford, because to play for Barcelona, no disrespect to the clubs that he's been involved with, but it's like when you're a kid, you dream of playing at Barcelona. And I think he will have took a drop, whatever it is. I don't know how it works, like Simon knows more than that. But I think he will have said, look, I want to go there, whatever it costs me, I want to go there. Because to play at a Real Madrid, Barcelona for a player like him, who's really on the fringe of everything, isn't he? He's got to pull his finger out now, hasn't he, really, and show the ability that we all know he's got.
Well, we'll get Alex Crook on the programme in just a second, and he's going to sort of go through the mechanics of the deal and the one that's taking Bryan Mbuemo to Brentford. But is there a possibility that by going to the Camp Nou, surrounded by bigger personalities possibly, that he can recapture his best form? How would you get the best out of him?
No, I mean, let's be fair. The better the team is, the better you'll play. You know, it brings you up to it. You look at the players they've got. He's going to get the ball in the right areas where he's good at, where he's potential. The last third, they get a lot of ball in the attacking half because there's so much on top, Barcelona, against the team. So he's got no excuse now. He'll get the ball in the right areas. Whether he can establish himself in the team is another thing when you look at the players that they've got, like you mentioned.
Manchester United have spent quite a lot of money. Mbuemo, obviously, nearly 70 million quid, and Cunha, they've spent 62 million pounds on. Those deals maybe have add-ons as well, which have cost implications. Can they keep spending more? Because they still need more players, as Neil was saying.
It all depends how they comply with the overall governance. I mean, we had this ridiculous conversation with Jim Radcliffe about 6 months ago where he came out with this absolute bag of nonsense about Man United were going to run out of money. We all know that was rubbish, absolute drivel, even their own account said it. And actually, quite frankly, he should have been held up by the New York Stock Exchange for being an influential figure influencing securities, because it was not an accurate statement. Clearly, they've got money. It's whether they can comply with PSR. Now, we're seeing clubs find their way through it. We've seen Chelsea find their way through it. We've seen Aston Villa find their way through it. There's no reason to believe that Manchester United won't find their way through it. And all this idea that like Barcelona were going to melt down 2 years ago, everyone in the media was saying Barcelona's in meltdown. They weren't. They were restructuring, re-engineering in the same way that Manchester United are. Going to Rashford, believe me, he'll have a decent season. Believe me, because there's a motivation at the end of it. And then at the end of the season, when he plays his little World Cup and contributes or doesn't contribute, he'll revert to type, because the motivation is there. When he wanted to play in the Euros, the motivation was there. Or in the last World Cup in Qatar, the motivation was there, and then he comes back from the Qatar World Cup and has a shoulder surgery before he goes back to Man United.
So how do you keep the motivation high?
Get good managers to control him, or don't worry about him so much and let him worry about himself.
Because it's not like he's only played under one manager. This is a guy who's played under several managers now. Unai Emery is one of the most recent, obviously.
I didn't think he did bad there at times when he played left, on the left-hand side. And you gave him the ball in the right place as well. And I think, but I think he does need handling. But it's like, it's hard, Simon, with the money that they're on. It's hard for the manager now to, especially the old-fashioned managers that used to just manage. Now, players, if you have a shout at them, then they get their agents to talk to you and somebody else and what have you. So it's all going to be down to him now as an individual. He's got to get his head right and show people, because I'm sure he wants to show people. I thought Arsenal might sign him, me. I just thought, why not give it a go up front for Arsenal? Because, I'm not sure about the lad they're trying to sign. Being definitely the number one. I thought it's worth a punt for us, but I suppose they've got to do it now when you look at
Goicoechea.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the goal scoring record. I know the translation from the Portuguese league may be difficult, but look at the goal scoring record.
Go on, explain it to us. How is Rashford taking a £10 million or €10 million pay cut?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Manchester United have made it clear that wherever he ends up this summer, they don't want to be paying towards his wages. It was a similar situation when he went to Aston Villa in January. I think this pay cut is more related to bonuses and loyalty payments in his contract than actually taking a cut of his weekly wage. Either way, it does save Manchester United an estimated £17 million over the course of the season. The fact that Barcelona are covering the remainder of his wages in full, and that probably will allow them now to dip into the transfer market. They need a number 9, obviously, the Mbuemo deal is going to happen. Cunha already over the door. I watched the friendly against Leeds at the weekend, and the same problems were there, really. They struggled to create chances. They started with young Chidio up front, put himself around, but I think he's still very raw. Rasmus Højlund came on in the second half, and know it's only a pre-season friendly, and Neil will say don't read too much into what happens in pre-season. But the same problems were there when it came to Højlund. Lack of movement, lack of confidence in front of goal. So I think getting a number 9 is really the next priority.
Liverpool trying to do the same thing as well. They've got a deal in place for Eintracht Frankfurt for the signing of the 23-year-old Hugo Ekitike. A fee worth over €90 million has been quoted, which could potentially reach 95 through add-ons. And he's going to sign a 6-year contract. 15 goals, 33 Bundesliga games, 3 goals in 26 in Ligue 1 for PSG. Does this feel like a sizable transfer fee?
It does. And I know when I was in the studio with Simon last week, he was a bit surprised at how much Ekitike was costing with it's still a fairly limited body of work. He obviously got that big move to Paris Saint-Germain early in his career, and it didn't really work out. I think he only played one league game for the French champions, but he has rebuilt his reputation over in Germany. I was told yesterday this deal isn't quite done yet. There's still a bit of haggling to be done in terms of add-ons and the final fee. But I think Liverpool are looking to do what Sir Alex Ferguson used to do really at Manchester United and strengthen from a position of power. And unlike United, actually, at this moment in time, if Liverpool do spend big money on a player like Ekitike and it doesn't quite work out, it's not terminal, is it? You look at Darwin Núñez, they spent big on him. He'll leave this summer. I mean, he had a pretty underwhelming Anfield career, but because there are so many good players now in that Liverpool squad, if you take a chance in the transfer market and it doesn't come off, it doesn't really have too much of a negative impact.
What do you make of these transfers?
Isn't it a lot of money, that, for somebody who's, he's had a good season or whatever, but there's so many question marks against what he's going to be like. I don't know where the money's going now. 90 million pounds for that. I just think it's too much of a gamble, mate. Or are they using that to try and give him a bit more time for the Newcastle lad?
Well, maybe. Liverpool would have done the math, though, won't they? They would have put all their calculations in. They're very good with their algorithms and data, etc., etc. But what does the normalisation of fees of this side do for the rest of the Premier League?
Well, is it a normalisation or is it just a circumstance where there's a lot of competitive tension around this?
Florian Wirtz going for over 100 million quid, 150 for Isak's been quoted.
Sure. I think the marketplace is where it is, right, for certain football clubs. I look at it and say, like Neil said, I said the other day, and Alex mentioned it a moment ago, about the credentials of this kid. He must have a lot of potential. Liverpool don't tend to buy bad players. I mean, I know the Núñez example is a glaring one where it hasn't worked out the way they wanted it to work out. But I do think it's a lot of money. I mean, you're looking at a player that hasn't achieved that much to be at that sort of level. It can only be because of the competitive tension in the marketplace. The other side of the equation is you have clever agents that get involved in deals and do Erling Haaland at 55 million quid. So you have both ends of the spectrum. But you're in a bull market for players right now.
There's not that many, is there, sir? Not many strikers around.
That's the issue, isn't it?
At the moment, that good.
And that's why. And then you look at the Darwin Núñez situation, and actually, Crook, it is worth pointing out that it was a different regime that did the hiring there.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny, actually, when you look at the journey that Michael Edwards, since he came back to Liverpool, and Richard Hughes, the sports director, have been on. They took a lot of flack for not signing anybody bar Chiesa last summer, and obviously Mamardashvili, who was sent out on loan. They took flack in January for not adding to their title challenge. They win the league, and then they go massive this summer. And I think some Liverpool fans would like a statue of Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards now erected outside Anfield. So they know what they're doing. And with the Villa signing, and by all accounts, he's been absolutely red hot in training. I think he played in the behind closed doors friendly at the weekend and made an impact. I think they're clear favourites for me, despite the fact that Arsenal obviously are trying to do business. Manchester City have added to their squad and were in need of a rebuild. I think it's difficult to see beyond Liverpool retaining their title.
Newcastle missed out on several targets so far this summer. Any danger that they're going to miss out on James Trafford as well now? We'll hear from Eddie Howe shortly on Alexander Isak's omission from the squad for the defeat at Celtic. But how much disruption has the departure of sporting director Paul Mitchell created? Because Eddie did say in a quote at the weekend that actually it does take a bit of pressure off a manager when you've got someone else to do all the negotiations.
Yeah, but Eddie's always been someone who likes to have a big say on how a club is run. So I think he's pretty comfortable in this position. He's got Andy Howe there as well, who I think goes under the radar, but he's been responsible for a lot of the signings that Newcastle have made, the likes of Bruno Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali, and most latterly Anthony Elanga this summer. But there's no hiding the fact it's been frustrating for Newcastle. They spoke to Dean Howson, but how do you tempt him to sign for you ahead of Real Madrid? João Pedro, I think, was always London bound and always wanted Chelsea. Bryan Mbuemo did speak to Newcastle, but made it clear right from the off that Manchester United was the only club for him. The James Trafford one is a little bit of a saga because you go back a year, they probably could have got him out of Burnley for a maximum of £25 million. They didn't do that deal. By all accounts, Paul Mitchell dragged his heels a little bit. Here we are a year later. He's had a brilliant season in the Championship. Burnley don't need to sell. They want to keep their players for their own tilt staying in the Premier League. And Manchester City have this £40 million buyback option that I think they're seriously considering capitalising on. Stefan Ortega could go in the opposite direction. So at the moment, this does look like another target that Newcastle will miss out on. And I think there's frustration up at St James's Park. They're trying to be ambitious, but because of the PSR rules and the fact that the Premier League changed the rules in the wake of the Saudi Arabian takeover, they're always going to miss out to those more established teams, the so-called Big Six.
diplomatic, isn't it? I think that was the word I'd use for Eddie. You can't blame him for being like, you can't have a go at people like Simon and all that's above you, because there's only one winners. So I think you have to go along with that, really, and just same with the problem he's got now, where he sent him home on Saturday, didn't he? And we've all had that problem, and you hope it goes away, but sometimes it doesn't. Once a player gets it in his head, he's thinking, I can win the Champions League with Liverpool or what have you, and will I do that at Newcastle, is he? And so
it's interesting how the version of events changed. This time last year, Paul Mitchell was the problem. Paul Mitchell was the problem. There was a disconnect between Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe.
Yeah.
And roll forward a year, and Paul Mitchell not being there is now the problem.
Well, no,
laughable.
I don't think we said that. I think
the whole media reporting last year was a fallout between Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe, and the comments that Paul Mitchell made about Eddie Howe being involved in the transaction of Mark Gahey and so on and so forth. And now roll forward, and we're spinning a different narrative that he's not there. Now
we are not spinning a different narrative. The quote came out from Eddie at the weekend saying that sometimes having a sporting director is a good shield for
latch upon it.
I'm just telling you what was said over the weekend. I'm not latching upon it, but actually the issue here is nothing to do with who's a sporting director and who's got this. It's the fact that the established order was smashed with money.
It's also got nothing to do with PSR. Newcastle got plenty of PSR headroom. They've got plenty of PSR headroom. It will do you can have run the argument absolutely about legacy football clubs. If you're going to go and play, the main thrust for Newcastle is to keep Isak. Keeping Isak and keeping away from that challenge is as good as a new signing. And supplement around him, which they're doing. Alanga's coming into supplements. And they've got some depth in their squad. They perhaps need a little bit more quality. But the idea that PSR is restricting Newcastle, yes, they can't go with wild abandon, which is what Man City and Chelsea did to build their football clubs. Sure, and the game has changed. And ultimately Man City and Chelsea were the poster boys of how to build a football club out of one person's wishes, right, rather than organically and creatively. But Newcastle have headroom. They had headroom last year. They tried to buy Gahey for 65 million quid. They've got headroom now. The problem they've got is if you're competing against the established order, which is Liverpool and Man City that have Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues in their back cupboard, then you're struggling. And that's the problem that they've got. And they'll have to pay for that privilege, perhaps in the wages.
Okay, quickly, let's get the latest on Gyökeres before we have to break.
Yeah, this is another one of the sagas of the summer, and there were some rumours over here in Portugal, where I am at the moment, yesterday, that Manchester United were coming in for Gyökeres and were close to agreeing a deal. That was quickly shot down by my sources at United. They haven't made a bid. They're not planning on making a bid. They expect him to go to Arsenal, and I think we could well see movement on that imminently. I still think Gyökeres, despite Sporting driving a hard bargain, will be an Arsenal player and will finally end that 3-year search for number 9 for the Gunners.
And that's why you're in Portugal, is it? You're out there to chase up that story, is it? Or is that a beach towel that I can see by your left shoulder?
I'm off to watch Forest Fulham on Saturday, never off duty.
Yeah. Who's paying for that? Right, okay, thank you very much. Speak to you later. That's Alex Crook, our chief football correspondent.
Watch out on the beach, you might get harpooned.
He loves a swim. He does love an open water swim.
Oh dear, yeah. Everyone else goes up in the tide.
Do you do that, Sam? Do you do it in Spain? Do you go in the sea?
Yes, very much so, yes.
Yeah,
indeed. On my jet skis.
You get poisoned if you go in the water, don't you? In England.
It's not the cleanest, is it? Let's
very radioactive ones come out green.
I've been in Switzerland for 3 weeks. Everyone just swims to work in the rivers. They're crystal clear. It's like being in Barbados.
Everyone swims to work in the rivers.
They do.
Everybody.
Is it
It's an exaggeration.
They do.
Absolutely.
They do. They get these dry bags, and a lot of
this
them
is the commentator's curse of crap.
They can
Sam, let it go.
Do a bit of research.
Everyone in Switzerland.
I'll take you over there.
Swims to work.
Yeah.
They don't swim to work. They flow down with
Everyone
the current.
in Holland wears clogs.
Right, let's talk a little bit about Thomas Frank, because he's taken up a new leadership role this summer. He's the new head coach at Tottenham Hotspur. They beat Reading 2-0 at the Select Car Leasing Stadium on Saturday, thanks to goals from Will Lancashire and Luka Vuskovic. Ahead of the game, the new Spurs boss spoke about the jeopardy surrounding taking the job.
I like to challenge myself. I've been that privileged. I've never been sacked before, so that's one of the reasons why I took the job. So I could get a little bit more risk into my daily life. I'm, coming to a big club. There's pressures. There's, we need to perform because it is we. It's me. It's the staff. It's the players. It's everyone, and we need to do that together. I like the ambitions and. I'm everything I do, every decision I made so far, everything is for the long term. It's not about surviving one game or 1 year or 18 months or what is the average. No, it's for the long run.
Do you know what? I've seen different interpretations of this press conference. So I watched the whole thing, and I know that some people say he looks quite tense or he doesn't look particularly comfortable. I got the complete opposite view, and I thought that the joke that he made towards the end was about sort of, almost making light of the fact that so many of his predecessors had been on the chopping board. How did you view it?
Well, I think he just knows it's a challenge, isn't it? And I think it's a good time to come in. Because he'll get the back lads defensively. He'll get them more organised and harder to beat, and hope that the players can still create things. But he'll not have worked. Having been at Brentford, he'll not have worked with Daniel Levy before. And trust me, it's a lot harder. When you look at me looking at Simon now, are you with me? I mean, he was one of my chairmen, and you know how difficult it is on this programme, don't you, to look after him? So you can. I'm telling you, Daniel.
I'm only here because I'm the only one who volunteers.
Daniel Levy is not the easiest of guys to. So I think before the season starts, managers are relaxed at your press conferences, and the grass is green, and you've never lost a game, and life's rosy. But during the season, there'll be times where you look at his press conferences and it'll be entirely different.
What do you make of the joke? Was it a show of tension, or was it sort of actually trying to lighten the mood a little bit?
Sometimes you say something to lighten the subject doesn't mean the subject's taken lightly. The angle of attack was that you're going into a different environment. The questions were being loaded and expected. Do you expect the challenges that comes with working for Daniel Levy? He's not playing Daniel Levy on a Saturday afternoon. He's playing other teams. And if he produces a side that wins, then he'll have no problems with his owner. If he produces a team that has a style about it, he'll have no problem with the fans. If you win with style, then you'll have something that you can hang on to. It's about what Spurs are going to become under Thomas Frank, how he adapts to a set of circumstances that are completely alien to where he's been. He came out of Brentford. He was part of a succession programme into Brentford. And built into the infrastructure of it. Tottenham are a whole different set of animals. They've got expectation, they've got a huge football club with reputation attached to it, they've got a stadium of fans that expect to be entertained, and they've got a group of players that last year I don't think covered themselves in glory, despite the fact they won the Europa League in the battle of who could be the worst team in the Premier League to win a European competition.
They have signed Mohamed Kudus, which might upgrade their attacking options. Apart from his qualities, Frank actually also praised the board for getting him in early in pre-season during that press conference. How important is that for a manager?
I think it's great to have your players in, early doors where you can probably go away and you can mix more with the team, not just on the field but off it as well. Because the dressing room gets you through the winter months when things aren't going so well. So I just think it's good, and it's nice to see him dipping his hand in his pocket really and signing these players. I think he would have liked Mbuemo, the lad who's gone to
Mbuemo.
Yeah, I think he would have liked him because he knows him, and it's great to have somebody in the dressing room that you've worked with for years. But they're not bad players that they've signed, so it's promises well. I'm looking on with interest at that one, because of what happened to Ange in that respect. But he's a solid appointment, and they were brave Brentford when they gave him the job in the first place, and again now they've given Keith Andrews.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because that bravery is extended to their former set piece coach Keith Andrews, or experienced player, and actually experienced coach as well, and he's done all of his licenses and he's been through different clubs learning his trade. Are you surprised that a man who's never managed in the Premier League before, in fact never had a frontline job before as a manager, can get a role as a head coach in the Premier League?
Absolutely, yeah, because I'm astonished, if I'm honest, at the level that we're talking about. But they went from within last time, so they think that they're going to keep all the staff in place, I would imagine. And Keith was a good player, steady player, and a nice lad. So he'll have to learn quickly, because, like I say, at this time of the year, everything's rosy. But he's got a lot to live up to with what they did last year. Can he keep them up there? I mean, they've got a decent squad now. They have a decent team. So
lost their captain, haven't they?
Yeah,
lost their captain to Arsenal.
Lost Norgard, lost Mbuemo. Yeah. Vissa's been linked with moves away as well.
I mean, he'll have to build, and it's not easy when you come in as a manager like Keith, who's never managed before, to get the money that they want to sign better players or players as good as what's just gone.
I was going to
That's
ask
the
you
problem.
about that.
Yeah, he won't be doing that though, will he? I mean, the fact is, if it was anybody other than Matthew Benham or Tony Bloom employing a 31-year-old manager from Germany, or Matthew Benham employing this guy, you'd say, can't see the thinking behind that. There's a lot of risk. I mean, Martin O'Neill will sit in the studio because of the vitriol he's got toward Keith Andrews, because Keith Andrews endlessly criticised him when he was Republic of Ireland manager, and say
about set pieces. Actually,
here's some reality for you. Getting the big job. Yeah. I mean, look, the more fascinating job for me is the one that Neil was alluding to. I would love to know what the brief is for Thomas Frank, because Daniel has gotten rid of Postecoglou. I think deservedly so for Ange, because I think that you cannot go through a season where they were so chaotic and so poor in the Premier League and look at it and go, well, you've shown me. If someone shows you themselves, believe them. He showed a certain style of management that wasn't going to get Tottenham very far. They won a Europa League in a competition that they should have won because it was a poor Europa League, and in the final they played a very poor Man United. So Tottenham got the monkey off their back. But I think they were right to get rid of Ange Postecoglou. But the thing for me is, what has Thomas Frank been told he's got to do? What is the standard that he's going to be judged by? That's the thing that I'm really interested to ascertain. We're not going to know it because he's never going to say it. But it must be top four.
Well, one of the things, I was just looking at the statement that they released when they sacked Ange Postecoglou, because I think there was an indication in there of what they wanted. He said that this is the board statement of why they decided to sack him. It was following a positive start. We recorded 78 points from our last 66 Premier League games. That's our worst ever Premier League finish. At times there were extenuating circumstances, blah, blah, blah. Whilst winning the Europa League this season ranks as one of the club's greatest moments, we cannot base our decision on emotions aligned to this triumph. It is crucial that we are able to compete on multiple fronts and believe a change of approach will give us the strongest chance for the coming season and beyond. This has been one of the toughest decisions we have to make, not one we've made lightly. So they obviously want to be able to compete on not just for the Europa League and then say halfway through we'll have to sack off the Premier League in order to do it. Morning, Simon.
Morning.
Looking forward to Don Charles.
Yeah, it's nice to see Don. Yeah, despite the exalted company of the Matterface, I'm trying to work out why I'm still the last man standing on this show. Jim's gone, Luke's gone, Joe's gone, and I'm standing around like the proverbial bad penny. I need to have a word with myself.
Well, listen, there's still a few people hanging around at Manchester United. Jadon Sancho is still there. Malacius, Anthony and Garnacho, all training away from the first team squad, but certainly Manchester United have got their hands on one or two acquisitions this summer, and one of those is Bryan Mbuemo, because they've signed him in a deal worth 65 million quid plus 6 million in add-ons. He is the second top target, as the club call it, that has been signed this summer. He made clear from the outset he wanted to join Manchester United. Only Haaland, Salah, Isak and Watkins have more Premier League goals than Mbuemo over the course of the last 3 seasons. He ranks 7th in total for Premier League goal contributions in that period. Neil Warnock was on this show with us yesterday. He said actually what he would have done if he was Manchester United manager was build from the back. So after the signings of Mbuemo and Cunha, will Manchester United improve next season? Where realistically do you think they'll finish?
Well, it's going to be difficult for them to be worse than last season, and there's going to be a real achievement. It's interesting for a football club whose one of its main operatives gave an interview in the early part of this year saying they nearly ran out of money, that they're able to spend like drunken sailors. So there's an interesting dynamic there. I don't know. I mean, I think that the irony of the characterisation of a United tax is sort of ironic, given the fact that the player made his position very clear that he only wanted to go to one football club, and that normally works as an advantage, because if the player is prepared to come to the party, then the selling club finds himself in a slightly invidious position where player doesn't want to play for you anymore, wants to go somewhere else, might be prepared to make a few noises about that, and that normally works in the favour of the buying club. It doesn't seem to have worked in this situation where Man United seem to have had to pay what I consider, and Neil was observing on it yesterday as well, a significant amount of money. But this is the irony of the transfer market. This is the irony of football. When we listen to people talk about football governance and we talk about the structure of football and the finances around football, and then you see transfers going for £70 million for players that I think are good players, but we've lost sight of the reality of how much things cost now. £70 million for a footballer that plays for Brentford. Well done to Matthew Benham and his team for being able to exact that kind of money. Well done for being in a position where you produce players that operate at a high level at Brentford. The big step off, the big question, which has to be answered only by his appearances, is how does he embrace the challenges that playing for Man United brings, that has fallen on so many players' shoulders over the last 12 years since Ferguson departed, and so many of these players have fallen short of the standard, or so many players have found the shirt heavy to wear. Whether he will or not is a different matter, but clearly the manager is now beginning to shape certain things in terms of players that he wants to bring in, because if they're not his players, then Christ almighty, what's going on there? But I don't know what it says about United and the way that they want to play. Neil talked about the idea of, he thought it was unwise, Neil Warnock, yesterday, of coming into the team and saying this is how we want to play, but that's precisely what Pep Guardiola did. Pep Guardiola walked into the Premier League in 2006 and said, this is where I'm going to play, and everyone, you can't do this in English football, and he proceeded to do it. Amorim seems to have had a race with himself to the bottom to set himself a low standard, managed to achieve it, and now ultimately is in a situation where I think it can only be upwards. Whether these two, I like Cunha. I think he's a difficult player to handle. Various conversations I've had with various people at Wolves, including Gary O'Neill, suggest that he's a prestigious talent, but also a temperamental one. And I think certain players in the Wolves dressing room were not having the culture of coming in when you felt like it and turning up late and whatever else. And I'm not sure that will be tolerated at United, neither should it be at any football club. But as a player, he has all the hallmarks of a quality player that could get United playing, but it doesn't answer the questions of how United are going to deal with the structure of the defensive side of the team that seems to have been the biggest challenge.
Well, interestingly, I'm going to disagree with Neil Warnock a little bit later on. I've got some points on whether or not he is right to sort of assume that Manchester United need to build from the back, and I'll tell you why I think the opposite is true.
Well, I think it's wrong. I think he's wrong because I think he's not pricing into the fact this is Man United. Man United, I know that once upon a time there was this idea that Man United were a cavalier side under Ferguson. They weren't at times, they were a pragmatic side. But when you're Man United, your job is to be an offensive, attacking side, and just shutting the back door and building it in Warnock style, which is ultimately we don't concede goals and we build from there, is a mentality that probably lies in lesser football clubs.
Yeah, and
with respect to Neil.
And we'll do that in the next few minutes. So you talked about creating the environment and maybe the culture that Ruben Amorim needs. He's getting his group together: Garnacho, Malacia, Sancho, and Anthony. Not going on the Asian tour, which starts today. They're about to leave for that. Is he playing to the gallery, Mbuemo, when he says about the positive environment? Is he sort of, towing the party line there, or can you see?
What he said?
He said that when he walked through the door, he praised the positive environment that Ruben Amorim is creating at the club.
Well, and there's nothing more positive than being wanted and coveted by a manager coming to arguably one of the biggest world clubs in football that's in the current malaise. So there's nothing more positive than that. And of course, like in an interview, and like when you're the Queen, all you smell is new paint. He's walking into an environment where you would assume that Amorim's delighted to have got him. He's pushed his owners to spend 70 million quid on a Brentford footballer. So I'm assuming that Mbuemo has walked into an environment that's positive. Now let's see how that plays out when things don't quite go the way that people think they should. The season starts, expectations rise again. Amorim's under pressure. They don't start well. We'll see how it goes. I worry, insofar as I have any worry for United, that culturally, I know we make a lot of stock in this, and sometimes in the modern day it's not so prevalent, but there seems to be a lack of leadership in that dressing room still. I don't think Cunha and Mbuemo are leaders. I think they're good players. Cunha's got a lot to say for himself. He talked about his love for Wolves whilst telling everyone he wanted to leave. I'm not sure that's leadership qualities, but he's got a strong personality. Fernandes has grown, but I don't think he's a sort of grab you by the scruff of the neck leader that maybe that dressing room requires. The marginalisation of these other players, I think it's right. I think that Rashford and Sancho and Garnacho have cut their cloth accordingly, and it needs to be dealt with because I don't think they're right for Man United. They might be talented footballers, but that ship has sailed. I think they for their own sake, need changes. So a positive environment. Yes, he's not going to walk in the door and say, "Christ, what have I walked into here?" And so you can take it with a pinch of salt, or accept the fact that Amorim is now going to get his backside down and his head up and start building this Man United team and stop telling everybody how much of a problem it is.
United's opening offer for Mbuemo was 45 million quid with a further 10 million in add-ons. Now, the first offer is always the start of a negotiation, but United haven't been very good at those historically. They've paid top price for every player over the last few years that they could, that they've signed. Every time you get into a bidding war, I remember the Leicester Harry Maguire situation. They started low and then ended up paying the price that Leicester quoted them in the first place.
Well, they don't have the currency anymore, do they? The currency that they had, the United tax, was the other way. It was basically the draw.
Because people wanted to go there.
Correct. And then you saw that sort of changing when the boy Alexis Sanchez chose to go to Man United over Man City because Man United were paying more money than Man City. And you thought to yourself, hang on a second, when did it become that the only reason you go to Man United is because you get more dough? Of course it's part of the equation, but it wasn't the driving factor. The lure and the luster and the opportunity to play for this football club that was likely to deliver outcomes and also was the prestigious football club in English football. Now it's a football club that's steeped in problems. It's sort of baked into people's psyche now that ultimately going into United comes with a whole raft of challenges, including a manager that isn't in control of things.
But because you know, as say you're a football club owner in the Premier League who's selling a player to Manchester United, or is the subject of someone who's got a player that wants to go to Manchester United, or they want, are you charging them more because you know how desperate they are to improve their team?
Well, in a commercial discussion, it's not a case of charging somebody more. You always want to, in any deal, whether you're selling to one of the big clubs or selling to a club that has a desperate need, or whatever the circumstances, your job and your aspiration is to get the most value from the deal, the maximum amount, and in fact get more than perhaps a player's worth. Now with Brentford, first of all, there's no particular need to sell for Brentford, so you've got that disadvantage. And the player coming out and saying that the only place he wanted to go was Manchester United, as I said a moment ago, is normally advantageous. In this instance, it appears not to have been, because it then puts Manchester United in a situation where Brentford are not bothered about selling him. The new manager would prefer to have him, because not only have you got Brentford making a big disposal, they've already made one, their captain's gone to Arsenal, so they're beginning to see certain parts of the team broken up, and you've got a manager in place that is an educated investment. I know that most people would say, and I think most people have looked at it and gone, wow, this is some appointment, Keith Andrews. I would suggest if it wasn't being made by Brentford, then I would be scratching my head much more vigorously than I am in this instance, because of the propensity for Brentford and the Brightons of the world to be very diligent in the reasons why they make decisions. But this is not a value, this is not an added bonus for Keith Andrews losing this player. So the position for Brentford was, we're not going to blink. So if you want this player, you're going to have to wrench him out of us, and you're going to have to pay precisely what we want, otherwise stay he will.
Manchester United unhappy with Brentford, apparently. It's been reported that United were upset with the valuation. It changed repeatedly, was being sort of quoted at 70 million plus 7 million at one point, and the club are also said to believe that they feel as if the Bees would have preferred for their player to move to Newcastle or Spurs. What sort of purpose does it serve to brief members of the media that they're unhappy with Brentford and how they've conducted themselves?
It's like a sense of entitlement, isn't it? I mean, it's like about a year ago, we had to listen to Jim Ratcliffe telling us how preposterous it was that Newcastle weren't making it easier for them to take down Ashworth, as if it was a given right. The United have the God-given right to go where they want, take what they want, and do what they want. I remember years ago watching Rupert Lowe as Southampton chairman, changing them. I was trying to buy James Beattie from Southampton, and every conversation I agreed a price with him, he'd come back and say, well, I want another million. And after about 7 of these conversations, I got fed up with it. He started to blame it on Glenn Hoddle, which I said to him at the time I didn't think was very Christian of Glenn, to keep changing the price points. But that's what happens in deals. If you get somebody moving, very rarely do you get to a situation where everybody sits in the room and goes, right, we're all going to act with absolute integrity, we're all going to stick to our words, and we're all going to do exactly what we say we're going to do. The moment you get somebody saying, well, I'll do this and do that, then you see that there's an opportunity to move them even further. Okay, if they do that. Because the last thing you want is seller's regret. The last thing you want to walk out of the room and go, geez Louise, I could have got 10 more than that.
Don Charles, the trainer of Daniel Dubois, has joined us in the studio this morning as well. Simon was on the show yesterday, revealed on this programme and on Talk Boxing on our YouTube channel yesterday that with less than 90 minutes to go before the first bell sounded, Daniel Dubois had only just arrived at Wembley for his fight with Alexander Usyk. His father and mentor Stan hosted a party at his Essex home on the afternoon of the fight. Daniel did not even know all of the guests well, and at one point left for a drive, or asked to leave for a drive. Their departure from the party was supposedly delayed after Stan requested extra people carriers to bring his entourage to Wembley. And when the pair finally arrived, footage surfaced online of Daniel Dubois' entourage being refused entry by security. Upon hearing the news yesterday on Talk Boxing, Joseph Parker called the situation insane, while Lauren Sokoli was also shocked. Don, what's your reaction to those revelations that have come out in the last 24 hours? What did you know about this, and do you think that the build-up led to the way that Daniel performed in the ring?
Right, let's. Good morning, by the way.
Good morning.
Let's retract. Let's replace the word party with gathering. It was a gathering. Okay.
Okay.
Right. The same gathering we used for the prep on fight day for the AJ fight. A lot was made of the ring walk when Daniel walked out in Wembley, 96,000 people. A lot was made of it.
The Anthony Joshua fight.
Correct, yeah. And the energy that it was fired up.
It was.
That gathering at the home, the same home, was taken to the dressing room. Some of the Daniel's friends and his father's friends were in the dressing room for the AJ for the fight. That energy is what gave birth to the energy that everybody witnessed in the ring walk, and we were victorious on that occasion.
So you tried to replicate it?
Correct. I think you would, put in the same position. If it worked for you the first time, it's highly likely you're going to replicate that. That's merely, there might have been more people granted for this second gathering. Yeah? Mm-hmm. To get more energy. That would be the only thing. I'm a logical man. The only logical sense that why there was more people is to increase the volume, because it's the big, you're going to the AJ fight was big. This is even trumps it. I didn't think that was possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So if you try to understand, that's what I do, try to understand. It may appear madness to a lot of people, but it's the same method that got us the victory. Stan Dubois, with his extraordinary methods, would try and replicate it. That's my take on it.
And that sounds logical. But did Daniel know everybody that was at that gathering? Did he feed off that energy, or did he turn around and go out for a drive?
I can't sit here and tell you that he knew every single person then. No, he would have known, because he comes from a very large family, cousins and brothers, and so a lot of the people, I know most of those people, they're his people.
Were you there, Don?
No, I was not there.
Right.
Reason being, I spoke with Daniel's father, and it's what I do. It's not like I chose not to go there. Yeah? My duty on the training team, our duty is to make sure, this is Wembley we're talking about here. I can't just as a coach. Yeah. We had to go to the dressing room and make sure everything is intact for the fighter to arrive. Yeah. So there's no confusion. So that was my duty.
So when he gets to I mean, obviously no one wants to use this as an excuse, because the excellence of Alexander Usyk is the excellence of Alexander Usyk. But the narrative that I was putting forward yesterday, and the understanding that I had, was it was very distracting and disorientating for Daniel, and that he wasn't comfortable in that space, and he's going into Wembley Arena, and his father's bringing an entourage with him. And I'm not criticising Stan here, I'm observing on it. His father's bringing an entourage, and the entourage isn't being let in. And then the entourage is being used as a weapon to say, ultimately, Daniel, come back, because if you don't come back and help us get these entourage in, these guys, you ain't fighting. And when you hear that kind of narrative, and then you look at the other side of the equation, Don, how long before the fight against AJ was he in the stadium?
2 hours before.
Right, so slightly different this time round.
Yeah, 90 minutes before. Right. Which you can play a full game of football in 90 minutes.
I know you can, but when I'm talking to fellow elite performers, whether that's Duke McKenzie, who's a 3-time world champion, as you well know, freeweight world champion. Yeah. You've got Joseph Parker, former world heavyweight champion of the world. You've got Lawrence Okoli fighting now in the WBC, ranked #1, and a double weight world champion. Both sitting there going, this is not preparation that's conducive with a fighter being entirely comfortable with his surroundings, being focused and zoned in the task that's ahead of him. Any deviation from what fighters have in their preparation, like Anthony Joshua in the first fight against Daniel, not having the preparation that he wanted, and then subsequently finding himself in a difficult situation. Are any of these things, that any of what I've just said, have any credence with you?
Well, most definitely. I mean, look, it's something internally we have to look into internally, right? I'm not sitting here and trying to justify. I'm just merely trying to put a narrative that the reasoning behind some of the actions that people are now persecuting.
Is it ideal for you as the trainer? I don't want to put you in an invidious position, because you've got relationships to maintain, and I don't want you to be in a situation where it compromises you. But from an elite trainer point of view, that's engineered a transformation in this boy, from somebody that was
not single-handedly.
No, I know, Don, but there's a lot of credit that goes with you.
Yeah,
and I know that a lot of the challenges that Daniel's had and overcome have been overcome as a result of your tutelage. Is this kind of build-up, this kind of environment, the ideal scenario for you to work in and to produce an elite athlete required to beat the best in class?
Right. Without sounding arrogant, if it works for me, which it has been working for me, I don't know why other people have problems with it. The only person who I have to speak to, we have a meeting pending, is our promoter, Frank Warren and George Warren, where we need to reassure them that we're seriously on the job, because they're working hard to present these opportunities. So that's really the only people's opinion that matters to myself and my team. Everybody else is entitled to their own opinion, to their view. The fighters you had in the studio yesterday, it's almost like everyone is waiting for Daniel Dubois. He's not wanted at this the boxing thing where there's an envy, I feel.
No, I don't think that's fair, Dom, because I'm the one that phrased the question to them, and they were resistant to giving any answers about an observation of other people's camp. But when you're confronted with an orthodoxy, which is fighters perhaps need to be at a stadium to get their bearings, to get their feet under the table 3 or 4 hours before a fight, and you frame the question that way, and then you see Daniel. Now, I saw Daniel on Thursday at Wembley, and I saw Daniel's disposition, calm, relaxed, more relaxed than I've ever seen him before. No hostility about who he's going to be fighting, sitting, looking out at Wembley Stadium, really together. And I thought, hello. Now, as you know, I wanted Daniel to win. I picked him to win. Right? And my version of analysis was, Usyk needs to be 3% off. Daniel needs to have his best night. That's how I pitched it, as being a situation where Daniel could win. But what I saw on Saturday, I have to say I was very disappointed with. From the moment Daniel walked into the ring, I didn't sense the same sort of intensity, the same sort of urgency. Now, whether that's the task in hand was bigger, I can't imagine it's bigger than fighting the nation's favourite, Anthony Joshua, but Anthony Joshua isn't as good a fighter as Alexander Usyk, so it's different from that perspective. And then we see the outcomes, and we see Daniel, I don't think was in the fight. I was disappointed. Everything I had been led to believe by you and the confidence that you were exuding and the game plan that you had, I saw none of it in the ring. And then we see Daniel getting knocked down in the first meaningful exchange, and the person that he's looking towards is not his trainer.
He was?
When you're throwing in the towel, he's looking somewhere else.
At that time, maybe. The first knockdown.
And all of those bring out a concern, because most of us that are British wanted to see Daniel Dubois win.
Correct.
And that's where the narrative comes from. It's not about, I don't think it comes from a position of envy, Don.
No, I'm talking about the incident yesterday. I'm not talking about the public. I'm talking about the incident in the studio yesterday.
So were you comfortable that Daniel arrived at the stadium in the right frame of mind and was ready to take on the challenge? When you saw him, when you sent him out just before the fight started for the ring walk, did you think this guy is in the right shape to go out there and win this fight?
I'm a very honest man. The answer is yes. The young man I saw in the dressing room warmed up. We had more than ample time. It was recorded. A lot of it was recorded, the warm-up. And we cheered him up like you do. And he walked out like you do. And I didn't see anything where, he's not on it tonight. Okay? Going back to what Simon just said regarding, of course, we're terrible. Me, the coach, I'm terrible. And the team, disappointed that we weren't able to execute the game plan.
Is Barcelona the correct club for him to regain his consistency after Rashford scored double figures in only one of his past 4 seasons when he was in the midst of his contract negotiations? Would some suggest that it's a choice that he struggles to be consistent? Actually, do you know what? I was going through the figures last night of Marcus Rashford's career, and it's amazing, really. He has only got into double figures once in the last 4 seasons, and he got 30 goals in 56 games in 22.
I think what people should do, I mean, there's a lot of vitriol every time Marcus Rashford comes on this show. The name Marcus Rashford comes on this show, Man United fans phone in and tell us, me and Jim, they categorically want him gone. I think we should lament the loss of a significant talent. I don't think he was ever at the level that people built him up to be, but I think he was a very good player.
There's certainly talent there.
But we should lament the loss of the culture of Man United, which enabled a player to lose his way.
So is that what you're blaming it on? Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you look over the course of his career,
blame it on the industry.
There's 22 out of 44 games, 22 goals in 44 games in 1920. 21, he got 57 games and 21 goals, had a dip in 21-22 after the European Championships and all the stuff that happened there. 56 games, 30 goals in 22-23 was absolutely superb.
But after the European Championships, do you remember after the European Championships? He came back from the European Championships. He hadn't been fit a lot of the season, went into the European Championship squad, came into that. After the European Championships, the club allowed him to go on holiday for 2 weeks
and then have
a shoulder injury, which to me is...
Well, not a shoulder injury, surgery.
Backside of that face. Hang on a second, get your priorities right. I think a lot of the... Listen, you have to lay the responsibility for the opportunities that have been not taken by the player at his own door. But if you don't create the culture for these young men to respect and value the opportunities they've got, they get distracted by outside influences.
But there's personal responsibility to continue to deliver even when the team is struggling, isn't there?
Of course there is. But we know that there are very few leaders in football. There are more often people that are followers. Unless you create a strong environment where strong leadership blossoms, and that means that the lemmings, of which I think Rashford has a propensity to be one, follow in the way that you want them to follow, you lose them. And you lose them to distractions. They get involved with outside influences. They've got more interest in what they're doing in their social life. They make judgment calls like going out to nightclubs in China Whites when they've got smashed by Man City. They make the decision for their birthday. They make the decision to go and not turn up for training and go out on the whiz in Northern Ireland and things of that nature. And these are things that are clearly being tolerated by culture. Alongside that, you've got the distractions and the wealth and the affluence that football, you've got the culture that people are not allowed to be told the truth, because if you tell them the truth, they can't cope with it. It's only good news that they can hear. That's why you don't build resilience and you don't build leadership into sport. Now, I think he'll be successful at Barcelona, because I think the clear thing for Marcus Rashford is to get away from Manchester United, for Man United's sake and for Marcus Rashford's sake, and we should lament that because he is a good player. I've always maintained...
And the Premier League is losing a good player.
Yeah, and they may gain him back. As a result of going to Barcelona, being in a club that's far bigger than he is right now, far more successful than he is currently being at Manchester United, with a dressing room of people that are far bigger than him, that are proven winners.
Yeah, but the only caveat I would put on all of that is that I look at some of his contemporaries, and I don't think that you would have said at the outset of his career that Harry Kane was going to be a leader. I don't think at the beginning of his career...
I don't think he's a leader.
Well,
I think he's a great player. I don't think he's a great leader.
I think what he does is he leads by example.
Yeah.
And his example is that even when Tottenham, who had comparably had more difficult situations going on than Manchester United, they've changed manager a lot more often, and they've struggled in league positions in a similar fashion. He still delivered. He still delivered.
But that's a form of leadership.
Season.
Spurs never won anything under him, and in competitions like the Champions League in 2019, they didn't even turn up in the final against Liverpool.
Yeah, but he always turned up.
Well, he didn't turn up in that game. And
he was injured.
And there's been instances in the other games where he hasn't scored against the bigger opposition that question him. But I don't think you can question Harry Kane as a footballer. I think you can question him as a leader. It depends what kind of leaders you want. I think Antonio Conte made very clear to Daniel Levy as part of his little departing salvo that he thought there was not a single leader in that dressing room.
But my comparison is the fact that even when Tottenham was struggling, he would still deliver. So he didn't use the excuse of the environmental problems for not delivering on a personal level.
Yeah, okay, but that's removing the realities of individualism out of the equation. Everyone's got different personalities.
Absolutely.
Harry Kane's journey was a very different journey. Harry Kane wasn't lauded and applauded at 17, 18 years of age and arriving on a stage where suddenly he was the saviour. Harry Kane was punted out to Leyton Orient and Norwich City.
Absolutely, and there's definitely something in the rise of Marcus Rashford, which was unexpected. Listen, everyone thought he was a good player, but he was thrown in on an evening, on a Thursday night. I was there at Old Trafford the night I was commentating on the game, where he wasn't even on the team sheet, and then all of a sudden he's in the starting 11. He scores a goal on the Thursday night, he scores a goal on the Sunday afternoon, and all of a sudden he's a superstar within 4 days, and that wasn't expected.
And there it is, and that's exactly right. In this country, we have a propensity to get people, build them up to a stage where they can't be built up any further, and then whittle them down, and also put them into positions where they're not actually at. I've always been critical of the observations that Marcus Rashford is a world-class footballer. I think he's a very good footballer, but I don't think he's a world-class footballer. And so when you're judged by those set of standards and you're constantly being pulled down as a result of it, it has a diminishing effect. But I also think he's responsible for it in terms of his decision. I've listened to some of the podcasts where he gets a little soft music in the background playing the whining methodology of how hard his life is, and most people will find it difficult to relate to. I also agree that just because you do a different job and you think footballers should be walking around with a smile on their face because they've cracked it and won the lottery every day isn't the real world, because it's their job. But I think Rashford will find his, and one of the reasons why I think he'll find his feet is there's huge motivation for him to do so. He won't be in the World Cup squad next year unless he makes an impression upon Barcelona. And he tends to be motivated when those things come around.
And we want him to be, because we want the best Marcus Rashford available for England when it comes to next summer.
If he's better than what's on offer.
Yeah.
We don't want the illusion of what Marcus Rashford can do. We want the reality of what he does, because a lot of people created a narrative because it's a way to beat Man United up, which is, it was a raging success at Aston Villa. What is wrong at Man United? No, he wasn't a raging success at Aston Villa. He had a few decent games. And certainly people, and I heard Andy Townsend talking about his away performance against PSG as being pretty poor, albeit the home performance was better. I think he's a good player. I think he's very fortunate to have landed at one of the elite football clubs in Europe, because I think currently with his performance, with his attitude, with his disposition, with the way that he's left Man United and the way that he did interviews with Henry Winter last December talking about leaving, I think all lead you to the conclusion that this is a player that potentially brings more problems than he brings solutions. But in Barcelona's defence, they've got a dressing room full of people that are far bigger than Marcus Rashford right now, and they've got him for 2 and 6 beside his wages.
Talking of players that have had a fall from grace, Raheem Sterling didn't manage to get many minutes or make an impact at Arsenal on loan last season. He struggled at Chelsea in the previous campaigns. He's 2 weeks back into pre-season and working on the basis that I suppose Chelsea at some point are going to present him with an option to leave the football club. I mean, at this point, is there an argument for just letting him leave on a free? Because, I mean, I know Chelsea are sort of looking for 20 million quid for him, but with a little bit of interest from Germany and maybe in Juventus, the chance of sort of moving him on it must be a priority for them. He's got 2 years left on the contract, which is worth over 300 grand a week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're aware of that. And they'll move him along in due course, ideally in terms that suit them best. And of course, if there is no appetite, desire, or regard for Raheem Sterling for any kind of transfer fee, Raheem Sterling's got to come to the party. Depends what he wants to bring to bear. You know, we're being led to believe that Rashford's taken some sort of salary sacrifice of some shape or description to go to Barcelona. I'm not sure that's right, but let's say he has. It shows a propensity to do something. I'm not surprised. I never liked Raheem Sterling the way he left Liverpool. I thought that was not engineered the right way. I think he's a good player. I think he's another one of those players that's been built up to a level that I don't think he was at. I think he's had good games for England. I think there's a constant thread of managers that are prepared to marginalise him. Pep did it at Manchester City.
Yeah, but he also embraced him for a long time too.
To a degree, he did.
Top scorer there one season, over 30 goals.
I accept that there were times, as I said, there was certain times when he was very successful at Man City, but the bulk of the time at Man City, and at certain key times, he wasn't as visible as one would anticipate someone that has achieved some of the things that he's achieved and some of the potential that people thought that Raheem Sterling had, alongside the ability that they dictated that we should all acknowledge. But this last 2 or 3 years has been a disaster for him. He moved to Chelsea and it wasn't successful.
No.
He didn't set the stage, and he goes to Arsenal almost as if Arsenal went, oh, well, we might as well have you. It's a last-minute thing. We'll have you.
I mean, it was a great deal for them. From what I understand, the mechanics of the deal were very favourable for Arsenal. But, I mean, from his own personal perspective, having watched him as much as I did when he was playing last season, he looked like a player devoid of confidence.
He did.
And that's a real shame, because there was a point where he was full of confidence and he would actually unsettle defences because of that confidence.
But there's a part of me that would say, and it might be people think mean-spirited and belongs in a different era, that if you're in a position where you are as good as you believe yourself to be, you've got to overcome these adversities. You've got to overcome this. You've got to build in some resilience and get yourself into a position where you demand the opportunity to be successful again. And I think sometimes these players and these people in life that we lionise, when it comes to bumps in the road, they aren't quite what you think they are. Because it isn't just a reflection of how well you do when everything's going your way.
We look after them enough? That's the question. I mean, I'm looking back at that 2018 team, at 2020.
I think they're looked after.
Team.
I think they're looked after too much.
A 21 team, and I'm thinking, you know what? There was so much potential in a load of those players that after those tournaments have just disappeared.
Well, I mean, listen. If you're talking about Dele Alli and people of that nature, they're making their own choices.
Sterling,
and there's so many distractions.
Rashford, Foden have not kicked on from where you expect them to be after that European Championship.
I think they're all individuals and they're all unique in their circumstances, and I don't think you can put them as a homogenous group and say that this group of players hasn't kicked on and they all haven't for different reasons.
But they all come from the same team.
Sure, but to argue that they're not looked after, I think is a foolish argument.
I didn't argue it. I asked the question.
Or to advance it. That they might not be looked after, because the one thing that footballers are is overindulged and looked after, and then perhaps not told enough of what they need to build character.
That's not looking after someone. Looking after someone is telling them, actually, you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to improve this part of your character.
That's a different argument then.
That's looking after someone just as much as the other side of it.
Is the industry honest about building character into players by telling them the truth? I would suggest it's not, because we don't allow it to be the case. And when you see, like I saw last summer, I didn't think that the media were hysterical about England's performances. I didn't think they were vilifying it. Yet the England players came out, and specifically Jude Bellingham, with petted lips about the way they were being treated.
I was on the touchline after the first game, and we were doing a wrap-up of the show, of the game, and someone said to us, well, you have to reference the fact that they've called out negativity in relation to the performance, and we were like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Oh, absolutely. So from that point of view, it's one thing being able to do the right things. What you're saying is by looking after people, it means doing the right things by them. And some
Doing
of that,
the right things.
and some of that might be telling them the
words.
truth.
Yeah.
Right? But then you tell people the truth and they don't like it and they can't cope with it. And it would appear that this generation, perhaps, and I don't want to be too global in my observation, are not capable of it. It's a one-way transaction.
Maybe.
All the
Some
upside.
people.
It's like the argument about player welfare. All the upside, no the downside. If you told these footballers 15 years ago that they were going to live the lives that they're living right now, but they'd have to play 60 games a season, you probably wouldn't hear too many of them saying, well, I won't be doing that. If I can get this kind of life, this kind of generational wealth, this kind of adoration, this kind of career opportunity, this kind of diversification to play for bigger football clubs all around the world, these life experiences, but I've got to play 60 games, I'll do that. Now they've got it, well, hang on a second, I'm not doing that. And I think it's all intertwined into a general destabilisation of the way that people in society look at outcomes and resilience and overcoming adversity. And it's not good.
It is that time of the year when you've got to negotiate with different clubs for your players, and players are interested in leaving, and you're trying to put a squad together for a brand new campaign, but all of a sudden someone comes in and swoops for one of your stars. Or in Brentford's case, someone comes in, swoops for your manager, your first team coach, your analyst, your superstar forward number 1, your superstar forward number 2, and your captain as well. A difficult summer for Brentford, because losing Mbuemo as well as the manager and some of his staff as well looks to be just the opening gambit, really, because Johan Visser has left the pre-season tour as his departure looms. I mean, look, after Frank going, Norgard going, the captain, Mbuemo going, mentioned about the situation with the first team coach. How difficult is it if you're an owner of that football club and you're trying to put together a brand new season which starts in less than, a month, when you've got all this swooping around you?
Not easy, is it? These are the tasks that you bring in top people to do top jobs with. I mean, this time last year, Crystal Palace were facing, apparently, existential threat as a result of everyone that they're being bought, that was their best players, whether it be Elise, Eze, whether it be Joachim Andersen, or whether it be Gehi. And they managed to ride the storm out and sold one of the players that they actually wanted to sell, sold 2 of the players, and one of them they got top money for, and was drawn to one of the elite clubs in Europe, which is Bayern Munich. And it's an interesting phenomenon when you're now seeing clubs like Crystal Palace selling players to Bayern Munich, and I quite like that, because I've always believed that there's an unfortunate position of being clubs like Crystal Palace where some of the legacy football clubs can take liberties with you. They haven't got to pay the top money for players. And I think that's one of the reasons why Wilfried Zaha didn't go to Arsenal at that time, because Palace had valuations of him and Arsenal thought they could nick him for 40 million quid, and it wasn't going to happen. Now, of course, it's challenging. I think that players move around all the time. People felt that when Ivan Toney left, it was going to be an absolute, Hail Mary to the future of Brentford, but it wasn't. They were a better side last year to some extent. Now, the thing for Brentford is, if they're going to lose these players, they must ensure that they lose them on their terms, as much as they have terms to lose them on. And now £25 million for a forward, and I think Wissa's quite a decent player. I think
more than that, wouldn't it?
I think that they have to make Newcastle work harder. They've made Man United work hard for Mbuemo. I don't think he's worth 70 million quid, but he is, because someone's paid it. And so in this instance, there must be thought processes that are flowing through. They must know these challenges. They're not coming out of the ether. 2 biggest things in football are gossip and money. So they would have known there was going to be interest in these players, and they'll know all this. And one of the things that reassures me, and it might be mistakenly reassured, because everybody at the end of the day comes up short at some point, at some stage in their evolutions or their cycles. Look at Man United, after dominating the Premier League for 25 years, are now in the doldrums, or certainly 20 years, is that Matthew Benham and the thinking and the sophistication behind Brentford's thinking has always been there to be seen, in the same way that it's the same at Brighton. They make very few mistakes. So Keith Andrews, for me, is the component part that I spend a little bit more time being troubled by, because Brentford can rebuild and they can reevaluate. And losing their captain for 14 million to Arsenal, not ideal, but notwithstanding that was always going to be the case once Arsenal came knocking, unless Arsenal were really not going to pay anything for him.
We asked Director of Football Phil Giles to come on the programme today, actually, and he politely declined.
But they don't do that. When do they come on? When do sporting directors really come on?
Not very often.
Certainly, and so we mustn't read too much into the fact that he doesn't want to come on.
No, but what I was going to say was,
has been on.
Are we actually overlooking the fact that because of the high-profile departures, we haven't maybe paid enough attention to the players that have come into the football club?
Possibly.
You've got Queven Kelleher, who arguably is one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League,
yeah.
and he was playing second fiddle to one of the other great goalkeepers of the Premier League. He's now going to be number 1 at Brentford.
Yeah.
Michael Coyote, who was on loan from Fiorentina at the end of last season, has had his move. It turned into a permanent move.
No one gets excited by those.
Very, very good.
But
fullback.
no football fan gets excited by someone they've already seen.
Jordan Henderson?
Merely cementing. I don't know. I mean, Jordan Henderson, for me, is a spent force at elite level. So what does he bring to Brentford? He brings some. I'm happy to be wrong. But Jordan's most recent times have been to go to a country that he suggested that he didn't support and was quite vocal about the human rights causes that they were trampling all over, yet went and played over there, then came back after 5 minutes because he didn't like it and went to Ajax, and then got himself involved in conversations at Ajax that people couldn't quite understand as to whether he was staying or leaving.
He did very well at Ajax.
Sure.
There was a lot going on behind the scenes there, but he did very well.
I don't think we can draw a parallel between the Eredivisie and the Premier League. I don't think that the Eredivisie as a league is in anywhere near shape or form resembling...
No, but Arne Slot would say that the transition was quite smooth for him.
But he walked into an elite football club with elite players that are Premier League established.
And he's working into a football club that has got a history of signing very good players based on a data model, which has always served them well.
And that's why we gain comfort from it. But comparing a manager's experience to a player's experience is like comparing apples to oranges. They're two different skill sets. So Arne Slot walking into a Ferrari and ultimately having to buy nothing, and people might want to say it was a Mini because it didn't win anything at the back end of Klopp's reign.
I'm fascinated to hear what car's coming out for Brentford.
No, look, I mean, I think Brentford are a very, very good football club. I think Matthew Benham is a very good thinker, and I think there'll be no stones unturned. But to suggest that we can't get sporting directors on as a reason for potentially the travails that they're facing, you bring me a sporting director that's been on.
I wasn't suggesting that. I was just saying we asked him to come on, and he said no.
And he did the formulaic no.
But my view on it is that are we overlooking the fact that they have brought in players because there's been so many high-profile departures? Johan Visser could be the latest of those. He could go to Newcastle.
If Thomas Frank was in situ.
Possibly, yeah.
People would be less concerned if they are indeed concerned. There'd be less confected concern on behalf of Brentford from the people that don't support Brentford if Thomas Frank was still in situ.
Newcastle, though, are the ones that we expect to make a bid for him. And Newcastle also, the subject of a bit of a scenario with Alexander Isak. We understand that he wants £300,000 a week in order to sign a new contract there. He's got a contract until 2028. I mean, there is a part of me that thinks, well, yeah, I understand why he wants that money, and I think they should probably just give it to him.
There is a part of me that understands that he signed a long-term contract and they don't have to do anything of the sort. So they
don't have to.
Well, then you get into the territory of, do you have to argue the realities of a player having the hump that he can't get what he wants?
Do you not think he's worth it?
I think that he is worth to Newcastle whatever they're prepared to pay. And there is a certain limitation to that, because it isn't just what you do for Isak, it's what you then have to do to others as a result of the Isak.
He's the star of the show.
Of course he is, but there's some big names in that dressing room as well. Tonali's no slouch, neither is Guimaraes, and neither is Joe Linton, and neither a few of the other players
they're all getting good wages, but they also understand just the value of this guy and his goals and the difference it makes to that team.
Is that how it works in the socialism world of Sam Matterface?
It's not socialism, is it? It's the meritocracy, and he does the star striking,
and they will consider they will consider that they are all part of a unique outfit. They'll understand that he might be the cherry on the top, but believe me, in the dressing room, if someone else's wages go up, there's not a tacit acceptance. Well, he's the star, so we shouldn't get a pay rise.
Well, the alternative is to lose him eventually.
That's always an alternative, because you're as secure as the long-term position of your contract. Now, do you believe that Alexander Usyk, if he continues to be as good as we think he is and as good as he's exhibited, right, that he's going to be at Newcastle unless Newcastle start
Alexander Isak, Usyk's the boxer.
Isak, sorry, I've got boxing in my brain. Thank you. I don't think he will be. I think it's a balancing act between what he wants and what you've got him under contract to do, what you gave him when he signed a contract, and what opportunities you facilitated for him to come into the Premier League against what the market forces dictate. I am with you to some extent. If the best players in the world are getting, or the best players in the league, or the best players in other clubs that he could join are getting £300,000 a week,
that's the point, really, isn't it?
Then he should be getting it too. But I'm also of the point that he signed a contract, unless it's a real quid pro quo, a proper quid pro quo from the football club, which is we get you to sign for 5 years, and by the way, we put a £175 million release clause in, and we're not accept a penny less. If there's a quid pro quo like that, then I can justify in my mind as to the reasons why Newcastle might get somewhere towards whatever he's on now, towards what he may want as a result of the economic. But really and truly, besides bad form and being a bad actor, he has no leverage. He has no leverage.
Because he's got a contract till 2028.
Correct.
Right.
And if we want to condone bad acting and bad form from players and suggest that ultimately contracts are not worth anything, then what does that say? You might say that it's realistic, but it's not to be applauded.
The reality of the situation is different, isn't it? If they were to receive a bid of 150 million quid, they would part company with him in a blink of an eye. So it's the same situation.
And 150 million pounds on the nail with no drip feeding down. And if people want it, then that's what they should have to pay. If you want to buy my player that I found, that I put in my team, that I gave you the vision before you even thought of it, and you pay me what I want, when I want, how I want, otherwise bugger off.
Simon, yeah, I know it's the holiday season and all that, but this is the best they can do. Drag me and you back together.
Oh, I don't know about that, mate. You were the lightning rod for me being inflicted upon the nation.
Well, as I said at the start of last week's show, there was a time when I was kind of, because Simon and I knew each other a little bit before the broadcasting, I was kind of training you, but I say, the fact that you've won so many awards since I stopped being with you speaks volumes. That's all I'm saying. I may have been holding you back.
You're the Gene Wilder in this young Frankenstein incarnation.
Oh, what a film.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. A riot is an ugly thing. I won't do that. Literally, is there a film? Sorry, forget about the sport now. We're on to the important stuff now. I could recite every line of Young Frankenstein. If you put a gun to my head, I could recite every... Is there a film where you can recite every... Don't say a silent film.
I think I can do Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Really?
I think I can do Scent of a Woman.
Okay. Yeah. Well, for me, it'd be the Maltese Falcon and Young Frankenstein. I can do every single line. A certain amount of trouble, I think I can. I don't mind. Okay, listen, Marcus Rashford, speaking of a certain kind of trouble, Marcus Rashford has, I hope, it looks like he's ended, what could you call it, 2 years of decline, dissatisfaction, however you want to put it.
Yeah. With the risk of cultural appropriation, Mexican standoff between the club and him.
Yeah, an amazing move for him to go to Barcelona.
Remarkable.
I'll get on to his wages because that you'll understand better than me. First of all, he said in his arrival speech that he said, "I already feel at home." One or two people have kind of said, "Is that a slur on Manchester United?" But he did praise Manchester United as well during the whole thing. Yeah, and I think sometimes we're in danger of over-reading these statements, but
and sometimes you're not.
No,
sometimes there's hidden meanings about it. I mean, look, he feels at home, and then sooner rather than later he gets served an eviction notice. I don't know. Look, I mean, Marcus Rashford, we should lament to some extent the decline of a talent that was never at the level, as I said yesterday, that people put him onto. They put him onto being a world-class footballer. I didn't ever think he was. I think he was a very good footballer, and so then they built him up to a level, and then they proceeded to whittle him down or judge him by a set of standards that were unfair. Now, for whatever reason, his career has gone off the rails. I think it's a lot to do with his off-the-field activities and distractions and having far too much disposable income and far too much free time to deploy it, and losing the energy and focus and the culture of United also helping in that. And I think it's a very good move for him. I think he's very fortunate to get it. Yep. And I think it's reflective of where this Catalonia side are right now, that the economics dictate that they can afford to take a risk on certain proportions of his salary and don't have to deal with the transfer fees. That's the overall picture. But I think that he will excel.
I hope so.
No, but I think he will, because I think he's motivated by after different factors, and one of them is an upcoming World Cup. And whenever there's a tournament in play, Marcus Rashford, without wanting to be overly cynical, seems to find the zeitgeist for how to play football again, seems to find his mojo and get himself into a situation where he's worth something to the people that might want him to be worth something. So the only challenge for him is how does he punch his way into this side? Now, I know there's an argument that Lewandowski has gone past his best, but I don't see him ousting Lewandowski. I don't see him ousting either one of the two wingers in Rafinha and Lamine Yamal.
No.
So it's interesting to see how he's going to be played out and whether this I feel at home mentality is going to find itself into his psyche when he's parked on the bench.
Yeah, you're right. First, he's got to do is get into the team and get registered, of course, because one of the reasons Nico Williams didn't go.
They'll do it. They've had this problem before, haven't they?
Well, exactly, and that's why Danny Olmo missed half a season, because they said we'll do it. Yeah. And there's a world of difference between we'll do it and getting it done.
There must be some form of assurances to Rashford, unless the optics of this move are as appealing to him as the reality of it, because it is a win, isn't it? I mean, let's have it right.
No, we shouldn't hide away from that. Whatever the appearances are, whether he becomes a backup for Lewandowski or finds his way into the team, and whatever complications there may be for Marcus Rashford to be able to say on his CV, I went from Manchester United, with all due respect to Aston Villa,
to Barcelona.
Yeah. That looks great. Even if it doesn't work out, it looks great.
I'm interested. I can't quite get my head around, and I don't think I got much of an answer from Alex Crook the other day, about how they've managed to create a scenario where the wages are being compromised in a certain way, that ultimately Barcelona aren't picking up all the wages because the wages have been reduced at their source. And at their source, by that I mean Manchester United.
I asked this before when I was doing immense preparation with our producer. It seems, because I said to him, well, so Barcelona are picking up all the wages, but he's taking a pay cut.
Correct.
Right? So that must be a separate contract, because when he goes back to Manchester United, they're not going to settle.
The only thing I can assume is they've done some form of deed of variation, and I don't quite know how that's done on a fixed-term contract, but I'm sure it's not beyond the wit of man. If you can dance around the league's governance, if you're Leicester City, by finding a Bermuda Triangle to disappear in, which means you're not governed by the Football League or the Premier League, it can't be beyond the wit of man to find a variation that enables them. And what I like about that is, to some extent, is that Rashford's been put... Because one of the things I said about 6 weeks ago, in order to get the Rashford deal done, people are going to have to take haircuts. And by that I mean the player too.
Yeah.
And it can't just be a one-way transaction, because I would imagine that United are going to dig in and say, you're the architect of some of this, you're complicit, you're the one that wanted to go and do interviews with Henry Winter telling everyone you wanted to go out the door, you're the one you're the one whose form has been challenging, hence the reason why we are where we are. So you're going to have to be part of the solution. And the fact that everyone's been a grown-up and found a solution, not ideal, because United would probably rather sell him, but if there's real guarantees, I imagine there must be, Dan, about Barcelona's obligation to buy him. The interesting thing will be is if there is a real enforceable obligation. If he plays 15 games or scores X amount of goals, it triggers the absolute obligation. But then again, if you're United and all of a sudden he plays really well for Barcelona, you don't want this bleeding 26 million deal. You want something far bigger than that, because his inherent worth will be bigger.
I think there may be a world in which they just want him out the door now.
I think that's probably right.
And you'll take a few million.
You take a few.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Alexandro Garnacho has sort of said, "Well done, off we go," kind of thing, which is fine. He's a teammate of his. And the question,
he would do, wouldn't he? He'd be running around with a Barcelona shirt with Rashford on the back next one.
The question is, whether both that Rashford's behaviour, from what we know of it, and Amorim's reaction shows, what Ruben Amorim has had to be dealing with. But I wouldn't say, up to a point, yeah. But really, Manchester United is single, and we'll get onto their amazing plan to charge the season ticket holders thousands and thousands. Yeah. It's the return of debentures. I said this. Arsenal had that debenture scheme. Yeah. Really, the problem with Manchester United is that at bottom, they keep making bad decisions about footballers. They keep bringing in players that they're paying too much for, who do not contribute enough in the football team. That's the bottom line with Manchester United, so I can see anyway.
And some of it is that they bought the right players that haven't managed them well. And made the wrong decisions with them.
Or the environment hasn't been right for the players.
I think it's probably a combination of the three. I think that the selection process has been flawed. They've had to pay a premium for some of the players that they've bought. They've then not handled them very well, and the players themselves haven't covered themselves with glory. No. I think Jadon Sancho comes to mind.
It's a perfect storm, isn't it? Brand new football club, particularly a big one. But that's
because the culture of the football club isn't right, and you can blame all that. I would suspect that because the Glazers are such a vilified species, that whatever they touch will be considered in a certain way. But I don't imagine that the culture of Manchester City is set by Sheikh Mansour. He's not there.
It's the manager and the people around him.
But then, of course, the recruitment of these people is by Mansour and his acolytes. And so in this instance, I never had Ed Woodward. I always thought that Ed Woodward could get a credit and debit column looking very good, but ultimately making decisions about the business that he was in for football and building a football team wasn't his forte. And so you lost 4 or 5 years in that space where Woodward didn't achieve the things that they could and should have achieved, and they lost their momentum, and City and others grabbed it. Now we'll see, if people like Barada are what they're supposed to be. This is an important time now for United. They've all nailed their colours to the mast. They've shuffled out the bluffer in Dave Brailsford. They're reselecting their pack. And it'll be an interesting season, because Ruben Amorim, if he starts poorly, it will be zeroing in on him.
Oh, absolutely.
There's no breathing space here.
Yeah, and notable as well that United made a late bid, according to some pretty specific reports, for Hugo Ekitike as well. Now, it's not, to me, people will say, that shows that Liverpool are so far ahead of Manchester United. Manchester United still carry huge gravity in the world of football, But if you're making late bids for people, it tells me you're not properly prepared. You haven't got your ducks in a row for the transfer window. Although opportunities do come up, you could say.
I mean, the logic would suggest if you're making a late bid for that fella, why weren't you buying Gyökeres, given the link between him and Amorim?
Yep.
Because what we're being told and led to believe is
and for 60% of the money, and proven.
And the economics of it are that you can't do it without Rasmus Højlund. And of course, that's the same economics that led Jim Ratcliffe to give an interview to everybody but us about the idea that they had no money. Because ultimately someone might ask him a question that was a bit more pointed in this environment.
Well, as we'll report later on in the show, he's getting some more money now, Sir Jim Ratcliffe. God bless him, because he was down to his last pair of decent shoes.
7 billion, yeah.
By turning the Manchester United supporters upside down and shaking them to see what else he can get out of their pockets. So it turns out that the players will be getting about 87 grand each as a winning bonus if they getting it for reaching the final.
For reaching the final, they get more if they win the final. They get a share of 4.3 million sterling.
And I guess the other thing people are discussing is whether Serena Wigman will then be given an honorary knighthood, a damehood to be absolutely precise. She's not a British citizen, so a bit like Bob Geldof after Live Aid, he has to get an honorary honour. Let's take the money first. Look, if the players are successful, they deserve whatever they can get and whatever is in their contract. The numbers are tiny compared, of course, to the men's.
Absolutely.
But all this reflects to me, Simon, is that the women's game is growing. People are putting some money into it. The sponsors are coming, and they can't. There's no problem with this. If they reaching the final is a big achievement. If they win it, good. To the work it is due.
It's all relative to the commercial value of the game, and I don't know what the previous structure was for the last Euros and how much they got and what the comparison is, and see if it actually has grown. But I have no issue. The England men's players give away their bonuses, don't they? And gave them away to charity, I think, in terms of the last competition, because the scale of earnings that they have at domestic level is vastly eclipsing this. So I don't have any view on this. I like to see. I disagree with arguments being put forward by people like Karen Carney that suggest that the money in football should be equalised between the men and the women's game. That's an unrealistic expectation, because you've got to commercialise the game, and every opportunity to commercialise it to benefit the finances of the game, to be able to enhance the talent pool, to be able to invest in the facilities, to be able to build stadiums for women's football that incorporates, because there's a lot to be said for it. I watch the actions and reactions from fans that watch women's football, and I don't like the argument when it's weaponised against men and women. Well, you took the game away from us, we couldn't play between the 70s and 80s. There's a part of me that says, well, you can have the 70s and 80s. That was when we had hooliganism. No one wanted to broadcast the football match and the game was going bankrupt. You can have those if you want, but the argument that then you should be...
I had a brilliant time in the 70s and 80s. I'd have them back tomorrow, but that's another story.
You didn't have that good a time because Spurs got relegated.
I'm not about football, so I'm way beyond the world of football.
All right, fine, okay. But insofar as these women being able to achieve more and more from the game and the commercialisation, the best thing that's ever happened in women's football in this country is the breaking away from the FA and forming the Women's Super League. Get the FA out of the way. The moment you got the FA out of the way for the Premier League, all of a sudden you had a completely different dynamic for football.
Completely moving away from this for a second, you actually have hit on something there, Simon. My favourite season supporting Tottenham was the year that they were in the second tier of English football.
Is that right? In your yellow
second
kit?
Division. They wore that yellow kit with Admiral with a bracelet went halfway down.
Indeed.
I happened to be at university before they
who was the goalkeeper? Barry
tired
Daines.
of my presence. They were tired of my presence. Very good, Simon. Very good indeed. Neil McNabb and his little moustache. Because in those days, of course, you didn't need tickets in advance. So we're in the middle of the country, and in a Vauxhall Viva 1100 that my friend Sly had, we went and watched every game, home and away. And Spurs were often, Simon, the Spurs travelling contingent was outnumbering the locals. It's amazing.
But it was like that with United, wasn't it? When United went down to 74.
It was brilliant season.
I mean, Palace were at that point in Division 3 South or something, trying to find their way out from...
Waiting for
me to arrive on the horizon. But on the other side, on the subject matter with Serena Wigman, I don't like the idea of sports people necessarily... I think gongs were given out for different reasons, and I think sports has hijacked it. But by the standards now that we give out gongs, she has to be in line for it.
Otherwise, it looks like discriminatory. Why not her?
She's won the Euros.
Yep.
Her achievements for England have been to get them to 3 finals in her 3 tournaments. By the Gareth Southgate metric, she has to be given an award. And whilst I feel that this wasn't what gongs were created for, the world has changed. It has evolved. and it's become a very different dynamic, and people get rewarded for lots of things in society. And she has produced an outcome for women's football at the international level, which has eclipsed the men's. And if Southgate's got it, then she must get it.
Can't
be an argument, can it?
I mean, well, it's the honour system. I have a problem with the honour system itself, and it's this. I haven't got one. Can you imagine a world in which the contribution I've made to the nation,
to the nation,
absolutely, has not been rewarded with a knighthood?
Absolutely, fundamentally flawed. It shows you the flaw of the system.
Every January and summer comes round, and I wait by the letterbox for the little envelope to flop through onto the coconut.
Maybe you should just swear and call them rude names like Beckham did, and you'll get one eventually.
The other part, thank you. The other story. Oh God, I don't. If I have to work as hard as David has worked to get one, you know me, I don't want to do that then. The other story of this is that Prince William is expected. He's the he's a supreme. Yeah, he is. Yeah. He's expected to go to the final. He didn't go to the previous one. It turned down to flying to watch the World Cup. I didn't go to that, but that was in Australia. I don't know. Yeah, it's no big deal, I suspect.
No, I mean, people can make noise about it if they want to. I think he's very vociferous, as has the King been about the achievements of the ladies, both present and past. And he's going to be there. So I think it's right that these figureheads, I mean, he's a passionate football fan, isn't he? You saw him in the PSG stadium when he's an Aston Villa fan, which I always find perplexing. I know that's where he went to university, but I always find it perplexing that the future King of England is an Aston Villa fan, with all due respect to Aston Villa, which is a great football club and I have plenty of respect for.
The person who's going to be struggling with this is Stan Collymore, who will want the King of England to be an Aston Villa fan, but is so completely Republican that he'll find him absolutely
conflicted.
Absolutely conflicted about the whole thing.
But I think it's a fascinating I think England have got a real chance in this final, because I think, despite the fact that I think they've been poor, and they were poor against the Italians, and the Italians have to look at themselves and think, how did we let that one get away from us? One quality ball in the second half, funnily enough, produces a goal. The two girls that come on, Chloe Kelly's done well in both games, and so has Michelle. I think that in a high tide, boats rise, and I think England will rise to the opposition. And I've got a sneaking feeling that because they've been poor, with the notable exception of a game against the Dutch, that they might sneak out a victory in this game against the backdrop of the Spanish being everyone's favourites.
Just to go back to Manchester United, and well, overall, the way the world has changed. In your day, tell me, because nowadays, obviously, you've got data experts and data analysts, and then I presume that whether it's Ekitike or Matheus Cunha or Bryan Mbuemo, the people who actually bought Manchester United, I suppose the recruitment committee and ultimately the manager probably has to nod it through and say, yeah, he's a good player, he's got to come.
Yeah, I mean, if you
in your day, it was lit. Sorry, can I ask you this? I hate to say in your day because you're still very much up to date with the game, but in those days, I think it was you and the manager would sit down and say, what should we do about this? We need a centre forward.
Yeah, to some extent. Ultimately, a manager would come with his shopping list of requirements, and then it would be.
I bet that was a great meeting.
It was
with
delightful.
You.
I always enjoyed those. Wonderful they were, especially in Januaries, where it was always the bastion of bad business, wasn't it?
And you were getting charged 25% extra for each player.
Agents sitting there just rubbing their hands together, as they do now with the release clause opportunities that are in the space. Look, I mean, like everything else, things evolve, and it's really important that it does, because this idea that you buy players from videos or from scouting networks that have reported back, and managers that have got a whim or a wish, rather than, you wouldn't buy a house that way.
Nope.
You're now buying, I'm not suggesting that players are buildings. I'm suggesting that you make sure that you do your diligence. You make sure that you don't have a Tonali situation where you don't know the background.
Sure.
You make sure that you have players that are fit for purpose, so you don't have a Jadon Sancho situation, so you're dealing with the psychological challenges that a player may have. Now, you can never eradicate all of the risk. What you can do is make sure that you do it properly to minimise some of the risk. So you look at it now, lots is being made of data. At the end of the day, if you put garbage into a system, you get garbage out. So the data models are predicated upon the intelligence that goes into it. And I was speaking to Dougie Friedman the other day, who I admire very much.
It's been a real success at this.
And Dougie's built a 58-point program which evaluates every aspect of a footballer and makes him almost fit for purpose for the requirements that you specifically have of this player. So you're not buying a surprise. You're not saying, hang on a second, in the fortunate world of Newcastle, you can turn a centre forward from Joe Linton into a centre midfield player. That's an added bonus, but you bought Linton for a certain requirement. So with that in mind, it gives you slightly more confidence in the things that you're doing. Does it exclude and preclude managers? Possibly. The eye test is always a massive thing that managers should be involved in. But this idea now that managers should be anywhere, I've always railed against it, not because it's about controlling and compartmentalising, but I'm not a football manager and they're not economists or financiers. So you don't really want football managers anywhere near the money, because it also conflicts them. Because if they're part of a player's package and the player knows they're part of their package and the player hasn't got precisely what he wanted, I always felt that conflicted the relationship with the manager to some extent.
Yeah.
So the idea of people knocking on the door of Bob Paisley and Brian Clough and people of that era is gone now. The scale and circumstances around football are far too big, and it's also open to far too much abuse. But going to your original point, when you look at people like Tony Bloom and Matthew Burnham, it's no surprise that they look at things the way they do. They're actuaries.
This was my next question. Is it any surprise that the two best clubs, apparently, at picking up players using data, have come out of the gambling industry, where having the right data is the difference between making a profit and losing money?
Of course. I mean, they are, to some extent, they have actuarism in their thinking, aren't they? They're assessing the probabilities.
For the more stupid listener, not me, of course, what is actuarism?
Well, it's about probabilities, isn't it? It's about evaluating the likely outcomes. So an actuary looks at certain things, takes all data and forms a likely outcome and balances it upon probability. And that's how
they normally work. What insurance companies work?
Yeah,
that's what
underwriters.
Yeah,
are specifically utilised for that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to underwrite footballers.
No,
but there is more thinking behind it. And then you look at those models at Brighton and Brentford, and you think, well, it's easier to make mistakes in those spaces because A, the glare of the failings that you have isn't so evident, and B, the scale of investment doesn't seem to be so significant. But it's relative to the football club. But it's like Palace with Muniz, without breaking any confidences. I think there was a battle for Dougie to convince certain people to sign the boy Muniz for £6 or £7 million. Right. There wouldn't be requirements for any convincing now, would they?
No, they
wouldn't. Because the boy is an absolute revelation there.
He's a star.
So it's a variety of different things that make decisions. But United, I think, has been I think they've been lazy. I think they've been unprofessional. And I think they've taken the path of least resistance, and they think that money fills the problem rather than looking at the outcomes of the money. I think they've paid taxes in terms of the United profile. When you look at people like Alexis Sanchez that chose to go to Manchester United over Man City, primarily because Man United were paying more money, to my mind tells you where Man United were. They were no longer a destination for success. They were a destination for to get paid. And of course you have to have both.
Let me ask you another question, because I've heard you say, and I don't disagree with you, Manchester United still has a great deal of gravity in the world of football, and it's it's very attractive to footballers. Yeah. As their current malaise, if I might be so strong, and of course if they'd won in Bilbao, they didn't. If they'd won in Bilbao, this would all look slightly different. And because they have won occasional trophies, haven't they?
Of course they have.
How long can Manchester United rely on their being the biggest club in the world, that badge? Because, Sunderland used to be that club in England. Or has the world changed now, where your global standing gives you much more sustainability, if you like, with being these huge brands?
Well, I think it's carried them for the last 12 years to some extent. And I think
since Alex Ferguson.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And eventually you are going to be, because people gravitate towards winners. If you've got your indigenous fan base and then you've got your global audience, and your global audience will be drawn to the winners in the room. And if a generation passes and the winners have changed and the deck chair has been arranged on the Titanic, in this instance for United's analysis, then you look at the cities of the world. I always used to compare, and we did this on the shows that we did. We used the analogy of Man United being Ferrari and Man City being Red Bull. And that is now changing because Man City have become serial winners. The next generation of football fans that are watching Man City around the world are saying, well, what about this Man United? And Man United are disappearing back into the Brian Greenhoff, Jimmy Greenhoff, Stuart Pearson era of being a club that's got prestige and profile and heritage and legacy, but no achievements. And the world is about achievements, and specifically when you've made the sport as global as it's now become.
Talk to me then, and sorry, Manchester United fans, I don't want you to, I know there's so many of you out there, do not turn your radios off. Talk to me then about how Manchester United have dealt with the last 12 years post-Ferguson versus the way Liverpool, seemingly by organic management growth, have managed to keep up. I know they've got American owners and all the rest of it, but they haven't made the mistakes that Manchester United have made, largely.
But in the Premier League...
They had a genius manager who helped as well. And here they are, champions of England by a mile last year.
But in the Premier League era, United were the poster boys. And when the Premier League landed on our landscape, out of the ether of the ideas of David Dean and Rick Parry and Alan Sugar and Noel White and whoever else we can think of were the orchestrators of it, out of that ether came Manchester United. Bang! No surprise that when the Premier League launched, the first 5 Premier League titles were won by Manchester United. And you look at the growth of Liverpool during that period, from something like £40 million turnover in 1992 to £50 million turnover in 1997, where United went from 40 million to 100 million and kept on growing. And a lot of that was to do with people like David Gill. It was to do with Kenyon and his ability to get commercial deals, but it was also to do with the fact they had an elite manager in there. Now, in recent years, in the last half decade, Liverpool have reawoken, and it's come at the time when United have declined and kept on declining. And football's always cyclical, isn't it? Yep. Otherwise, Preston would still be at the top of the pyramid.
Or Sunderland, as I say. Yeah.
So it's for United now in this global game that's become so significant to reawaken themselves and start getting best in class back into their environments. Now, whether that's Ruben Amorim at the management level or whether it's Omar Barada in the boardroom, we'll see. Jim Radcliffe, I think, has not cut through the way people thought we'd done. I find what Jim's done very strange. He's put himself in the way of all the brickbats. The Glazers must be going, fantastic. You want to be a shield, you want to take all that crap, you take it, because he's made himself very unpopular with some of the things he's had to do, I think.
Also, excuse me for saying this because maybe I lack vision, showing drawings of this huge new stadium with a spire that's supposed to dominate as far as Merseyside. Yeah. This is all fine and dandy. Get this thing sorted out on the pitch first.
Well, yeah. I mean, some people say it's all fur coat and knickers, but ultimately it's part of the proposition, isn't it? They know they've got to evolve Manchester United, and part of it is a stadium. They're looking across at what Daniel's done with Spurs, looking at this wonderful stadium that's being enabled left, right and centre, and thinking, this is what we've got to do. But the irony of it is, in one breath, you've got Jim Radcliffe sitting down, like I said earlier on, saying, please, Gov, we've got no money. And we nearly ran out in November. In the next breath, he's telling you he's going to build a £2.5 billion stadium.
They're building the Taj Mahal in Salford. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.